Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today we're diving into the latest from Box Inc., a company you probably know for its cloud storage and file sharing services. Get ready for a wild ride where we look at how they make money. Think of it as trying to understand what your friend really does for a living after they give you a vague explanation. Okay, before we start, if you appreciate getting straight insights from corporate documents, make sure you're subscribed. We also have a Discord community linked in the description below where you can discuss this and many other corporate reports. This is their proxy statement, kind of like an instruction manual for the upcoming annual meeting of stockholders. Think of it as a report card, voting ballot, and crystal ball all rolled into one, giving us a peek into Box's plans and performance. The annual meeting is scheduled for June 27, 2025. At this meeting, shareholders get to vote on important things like who sits on the board of directors and whether they agree with how much the top executives are paid. First up is electing two Class 2 directors. Directors are like the supervisors of the company. The document recommends shareholders vote for Dan Levin and Bethany Mayer. If voted in, they will hold their position until the 2028 meeting. Next, shareholders are asked to give an advisory vote on executive compensation. It's essentially a thumbs up or thumbs down on how much the top bosses are getting paid. The recommendation? Vote for it. This is usually a controversial vote. The company wants to increase the number of shares available for their equity incentive plan by 5 million. Equity is a fancy word for stocks, so think of it as expanding the employee benefit bucket. A vote for is recommended. Similar to the previous proposal, this seeks to increase the shares available, but this time for the Employee Stock Purchase Plan ESPP by 6 million shares. The company suggests you vote for Savtrue. Next up is an amendment to their corporate charter to limit the liability of certain officers to the fullest extent permitted by Delaware law. Delaware is a popular state for incorporating, and this change would protect company leaders from certain lawsuits. Again, the company recommends a full vote. Finally, shareholders are asked to approve the appointment of Ernst & Young LLP as their independent auditor for the fiscal year ending January 31, 2026. This is basically confirming who is checking box math. A vote for is recommended. Let's switch over to a summary table that tells the board recommendation for each item. Now let's scroll to a summary of the board of directors. We see Bethany Mayer is the board chair, Sue Barsamian is on the compensation committee, and Dana Evan is on the nominating and corporate governance committee. Dan Levin also sits on the nominating and corporate governance committee. Dan Levin also sits on the nominating and corporate governance committee. These are some of the most important committees in the board. It's worth noting the corporate governance highlights because they give a snapshot of the board's values. We see several positives. The board chair and committee heads are women, most directors are independent, and they aim for term limits of 10 years or less. It seems like they value diverse input and are active in board refreshment. There's also a policy against hedging company stock, meaning directors can't bet against the company's success. The proxy statement goes on to profile the directors and nominees individually. It mentions that Dan Levin, who previously held senior positions at Box, including president and COO, is nominated for re-election. Bethany Mayer, who's been a director since 2020 and is currently board chair, is up for re-election. It highlights her extensive experience in tech and leadership roles. The remaining directors include more seasoned professionals from the tech and finance industries. Of course, there is Aaron Levy, who is a board member and CEO. Here we see that the board has determined that all directors, aside from the CEO, are independent. The proxy statement emphasizes that none of the compensation committee members are current or former officers of the company. This reinforces that compensation decisions are made independently. It's worth highlighting that the corporation also publishes some ESG values. The company says it is committed to operating in an environmentally responsible manner and leveraging technology to enable more efficient digital-first solutions. Their report mentions that the buildings in their office locations are either LEED, BREEAM, or Energy Star certified, depending on the location in 2025. They also started doing a company-wide GHG assessment. Let's get into how the board of directors are compensated. The table shows the non-employee directors' compensation for fiscal year 2025. Jack Lazar earned the most due to his position as audit committee chair, pulling in $78,627, while John Park did not receive anything. Bethany Mayer made $424,305. Note that this does not include this CEO's compensation, but it does include this CEO's compensation, but it does include the non-cash components as well. Moving on to the advisory vote on executive compensation. otherwise known as a say-on-pay vote, the board recommends that shareholders vote for approval, with the proxy stating that last year the company had a 98% approval of executive compensation. Since the results are non-binding, it mostly serves as a benchmark of the shareholders' view on the compensation of the board. The report mentions that the company is seeking stockholder approval to add 5 million shares to their 2015 equity incentive plan. This is in order to attract and retain the best talent. Their average burn rate, a measure of how quickly equity is used, is 2.79%, which sounds pretty normal. The final proposal deals with Ernst & Young as Box's independent auditing firm and recommends that the appointment be ratified. The proxy also mentions fees paid to Ernst & Young. For fiscal year 2025, audit fees amounted to $3,289 to $181,181, while tax fees were $400 the bulk. Signaling that the bulk, 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 signaling that the bulk signaling role is indeed auditing. Next, let's check out how the top executives are getting paid. It says that the revenue was $1.090 billion and non-GAAP operating income was $303.6 million. Here we have the summary compensation table for fiscal year 2025. Mr. Levy, the CEO, had a total compensation of $12,600 at $8,146. Olivia Dabome, the COO, had a total compensation of $4,058,026, and Dylan Smith, the CFO, had a total compensation of $5,051,696. A bulk of that is in stock awards. The filing continues by stating that the goal of the executive compensation program is to tie pay to the company's performance. It's interesting to note that the CEO's target cash compensation is below the 10th percentile of peer group companies, and the other top execs are below the 25th percentile. This could mean that the CEO is underpaid, or it means the other forms of compensation are more impactful. As of January 31, 2025, there were roughly 15.7 million securities to be issued upon the exercise of outstanding options, and a little over 11.4 million securities remaining available for future issuance. This is a key metric for understanding future dilution. Time to find out which entities hold the most power. Here we see that BlackRock Inc. is the beneficial owner of 17.6% of the Class A common stock. Next in line is the Vanguard Group coming in at 12.6%. A lot of these other positions is owned by investment firms that hold convertible preferred stock. Now let's dig into my take on Box. Their move to tie executive compensation to long-term stock performance seems promising. While the dependence on these particular executives is a risk, they seem to be trying to make the decisions independent, fair, and well thought out. The board having limited terms and that is composed of women and independent board members as the head of important committees is interesting and goes against the tradition of old white men leading most corporations. It seems like it could be beneficial to have different diverse views. Hopefully this creates more innovation. Overall, Box appears to be making a concentrated effort to align company goals with those of their shareholders. Alright, that's our breakdown of Box's latest filing. What's your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching, see you next time.